My son thinks he left a confused old woman behind at this highway rest stop, trusting I would fade into the night. He believes he is safe at his luxury resort right now. But tomorrow morning, when he turns on the television, he will see my face staring back at him. He did not just abandon his mother. He triggered a bomb that is going to destroy his perfect life. My name is Margaret Louise Harlow. I am 63 years old, and I am currently freezing to death on a hard plastic chair in a highway patrol substation somewhere off Interstate 70. The air conditioning is humming with a relentless, industrial aggression that makes the hair on my arms stand up. I pull my thin beige cardigan tighter around my shoulders, but it does nothing to stop the chill. My jeans are covered in grey dust from the parking lot, and I can feel the grit against my skin. The room is an assault on the senses. In the corner, a vending machine buzzes with a loud, broken mechanical rattle that sounds like a dying animal. Above it, a small television monitor is broadcasting a traffic update for a city 300 miles away. The volume turned down low, but the flickering blue light catches the corner of my eye. The air smells thick and stagnant, a nauseating mixture of coffee that has been burning on a hot plate for 5 hours and the damp, chemical scent of rubber raincoats and floor wax. It makes my stomach turn over. Or maybe that is just the panic finally settling in. Across the metal desk, a young officer is typing my name into a computer terminal that looks like a relic from the 90s. The screen flickers green and black. He types slowly, one finger at a time. He cannot find me. I do not exist in his database. I do not exist because my purse, my driver's license, my social security card, and my cell phone are all traveling west at 75 miles per hour inside a silver SUV. I try to explain it to him again. My voice sounds thin and scratchy in the quiet room. I tell him my son must have thought I was in the back seat. I tell him it was just a misunderstanding at the gas pumps. But even as I say the words, I can hear how hollow they sound. They sound like the desperate excuses of a confused old woman who has wandered away from her caretaker. I catch a glimpse of myself in the dark glass of the window. My hair is silver and thin, escaping from its clip. My face is pale. Do I look like I have lost my mind? Is that what he sees? The officer looks up at me, and his expression hovers somewhere between pity and professional suspicion. He thinks I am senile. He thinks I walked away. But I know what happened. The image flashes behind my eyes, sharp and violent. I see the red glow of tail lights, not brake lights, driving lights. They were moving away from me. I was standing by the door of the women's restroom, holding a paper cup of hot coffee that was burning my fingers. I watched the silver car merge onto the exit ramp. I took a step forward, expecting it to turn around, expecting to see brake lights flare red as Daniel realized I was not in the car. But they never flared. The car just kept going, smaller and smaller, until it was swallowed by the blackness of the highway. I shift in my seat and look at the woman sitting on the bench opposite me. Lena. She is the only reason I am not still standing in that parking lot screaming at the dark. She is a truck driver, broad-shouldered and wearing a vest with reflective strips. She found me when I was stumbling near the diesel pumps. She did not treat me like a lost child. She treated me like a stranded motorist. Right now, she is the only witness I have. She is the only person in this room who believes that I did not just wander off into the night because my brain misfired. The officer stops typing. He asks me if I can remember a phone number for a relative. Just one number. I open my mouth to say Daniel's name, to recite the digits I should know by heart. But my mind is a terrifying blank sheet. For 10 years. I have just pressed the word son on my screen. For 10 years. I have let the machine do the remembering for me. I try to picture the numbers, but they slide away like water. I feel a cold sweat break out on my neck. I have been erased. Without that phone, without that contact list. I am cut off from every human connection I spent a lifetime building. Do you have anyone else who can verify your identity? The officer asks. The question hits me like a physical blow. I worked for 30 years as a dispatcher. I managed fleets. I raised 2 children. I paid off a mortgage. But here, in this fluorescent-lit room at 2 in the morning, none of that matters. Without a piece of plastic with my photo on it, my life's work equals 0. I am just a body taking up space on a government chair. Lena leans forward, resting her elbows on her knees. She keeps her voice low so the officer cannot hear. She suggests taking my picture. She says she can post it to a private group she belongs to, a network of truckers who watch out for each other on the road. She says maybe someone saw the car. Maybe someone will recognize me. I feel a hot flush of humiliation climb up my neck. I have never been a charity case. I have never been the victim on the news. I am Margaret Louise Harlow. I am the one who organizes things. To have my face posted on the internet like a lost dog feels like a violation. But I look at the empty desk. I look at the darkness outside the window. I have nothing. I nod my head slowly. Lena raises her phone. I try to sit up straight. I try to look dignified. But I know I look like a ghost. My eyes are red-rimmed and frightened. Click. The sound of the camera shutter is loud and artificial. It echoes in the room. It is a cold, mechanical sound. I do not know it yet, but that sound is the most important noise of my life. Daniel thinks he has driven away into a clean new future. He thinks he has left a helpless old woman in his rearview mirror. He does not know that the shutter just clicked on his execution. I close my eyes against the harsh fluorescent lights of the police station and let my mind drift back to a time when I was useful. I was not always a woman without a name. I was born in a small town in Kansas where the wheat fields stretch out until they touch the sky. For more than 30 years. I sat behind a desk at Harlow and Sons Hauling. I was the voice on the radio for 20 drivers. I knew every pothole on Interstate 35 and every speed trap between Wichita and Omaha. I treated those drivers like family, and they treated me like the queen of the highway. My husband, Jack, was the king. He was a long-haul trucker with hands rough enough to change a semi-tire, but gentle enough to hold a baby without waking him. Jack died 4 years ago. It was a massive heart attack behind the wheel, right outside of Tulsa. He managed to pull the rig onto the shoulder before he passed, saving the load and the cars around him. That was just who Jack was. When he died, the silence in the house was so loud it hurt my ears. I sold most of the fleet because I could not bear to hear the radios chatter without his voice cutting through the static. I kept the house, and I put the life insurance money into a savings account that I swore I would never touch. We had 2 children. Rachel is my youngest. She is 34 now, a nurse up in Nebraska. She works long shifts and looks tired all the time, but she still calls me every Sunday afternoon just to ask what I had for lunch. Then there is Daniel, my firstborn, my golden boy. Daniel is 38. He lives in Texas and calls himself a freelance real estate broker. He drives leased luxury cars and wears suits that cost more than Jack made in a month. But his eyes are always shifting, looking for the next exit. I loved him with a blindness that only a mother can possess. Over the last decade, I became his personal bank. It started with small loans to get him through a rough patch. Then it was $5,000 for a car repair. Then it was $20,000 to help him start a brokerage firm that never seemed to have an actual office address. Jack knew. Before he died. He sat down with our old friend Benjamin, who was also our lawyer. They drew up a specific will. Everything remained in my name for 4 years after his death. There was also a sealed letter from Jack, kept in Benjamin's safe. The instructions were strict. The letter was to be opened exactly 4 years after his death, and only if I was present in the room. That stipulation drove Daniel mad. He raged about how his father did not trust him. He stopped talking to Rachel for 6 months because he convinced himself that she had whispered poison in my ear to cut him out. But I just wanted peace. When Daniel called me at 2 a.m, breathless and panicked, telling me that creditors were going to take his house if he did not come up with $8,000 by sunrise, I wired it. I always wired it. I told myself I was being a good mother. I told myself that once the 4 years were up and the will was executed, he would finally settle down. I remember a moment 3 months ago that should have woken me up. I was visiting Daniel in Texas. I walked into the kitchen and he was on the phone with his wife, Nicole. It was on speaker, and they did not hear me come in. Nicole was screaming. She was yelling about credit card debt and money lost in cryptocurrency. I heard her say that the insurance money from Jack was their last exit strategy. She called it a payout. Not an inheritance. A payout. I backed out of the room silently. Later, when I told Rachel, she sighed, heavy and sad. She told me that Daniel looked at me and saw a bank account, not a human being. I defended him. I told her he was just under pressure. I lied to her. And I lied to myself. The last memory I have before this trip is standing in my kitchen at home. I was washing a coffee mug, staring at the wall calendar. I had taken a red marker and circled the date 2 weeks from now. That was the 4-year anniversary. That was the day we were all meeting at the lawyer's office to open the letter and settle the estate. I looked at that red circle and felt relief. I thought it marked the day my family would be healed. I did not know that for Daniel. That red circle was not a celebration. It was a deadline. The invitation came out of nowhere, sweet and deadly like antifreeze. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Daniel called me, his voice lighter than I had heard it in years. He said, "Mom, listen. Before we deal with all the heavy legal stuff at the lawyer's office, why don't I come get you? We can take a road trip for a few days. You always said you wanted to actually see the highways you spent your whole life directing drivers on." I held the receiver against my ear, and my eyes welled up. It felt like an olive branch. It felt like my son was finally coming back to me. I imagined us driving through the open plains, talking about his father, fixing the cracks in our relationship before the money changed hands. I said yes. I said yes so fast, desperate to believe him. Then Nicole called. Her voice was different, sugary, but with a hard, brittle edge underneath. She told me not to worry about packing much. "Let us handle the logistics. Margaret," she said, "and you should let us hold on to your important papers. You know how easily things get lost when you are moving between hotels. Just put your ID and insurance cards in a folder, and we will keep them safe in the glove box." I hesitated. For 30 years, I had managed logistics for 18-wheelers. I was not prone to losing things. But I did not want to start a fight before the trip even began. So, like a fool, I agreed. Rachel could not come. She was working a string of night shifts at the hospital in Omaha. We video chatted the night before I left. I held the phone up to show me. The photo she had taken of me earlier, the one where I looked small and defeated, had been shared by a trucker with a massive following on TikTok. He had added a caption about how the industry protects its own and how leaving a mother behind was a cardinal sin. The view count was climbing by the thousands every minute. The comments were rolling in faster than I could read. A digital army of strangers demanding justice for the lady in the denim jacket. That night, Daniel and Nicole arrived late and stayed in the guest room. I woke up around 3 a.m, thirsty for water. As I crept down the hallway, I heard voices drifting from the living room. They had not gone to bed. The room was dark, lit only by the glow of a laptop screen. I froze at the top of the stairs. The life insurance payout is the only thing that clears the debt, Daniel was whispering. His voice was tight, stressed. But the probate court, Nicole hissed back. If she shows up on the 15th, the trust locks it down. But if she is unavailable, if she misses the appointment. I took a step back, the floorboard creaking under my foot. The voices stopped instantly. Daniel appeared at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at me. His face shifted in a split second from intensity to a bright, fake smile. Hey, Mum. Just checking the weather for tomorrow. Looks like clear skies all the way west. I stood there in my nightgown, feeling suddenly small and foolish, like a child caught spying. I nodded and went back to bed, forcing myself to believe they were just worried about traffic. The next morning was a blur of calculated efficiency. As soon as I got into the passenger seat of their silver SUV, Daniel held out his hand. Give me your phone. Mum. I will plug it into the charger in the center console so it does not die on the road. You won't need it anyway. We are here to talk. I handed it over. I watched him plug it in, but then he slipped it into the deep storage bin between the seats and closed the lid. My purse, my medication, my wallet. Everything went into the trunk, buried under their suitcases. More legroom for you? Nicole chirped from the back seat. For the first few hours, it worked. Daniel played a playlist of old country songs that Jack used to love: Merle Haggard, George Jones. He asked me about the blizzard of '98, asked me to tell stories about the drivers I used to manage. I softened. I let my guard down. I forgot the whispers in the living room. I was just a mother on a trip with her son. We stopped for gas at a dusty station near the state line. I went inside to buy a pack of gum. The boy behind the counter, a young kid with greasy hair and a name tag that said, Tyler, stared at me. He pointed to a framed, yellowing newspaper clipping on the wall behind the register, a local interest story about the angels of the highway from 20 years ago. Wait, he said. That is you. Right. You are the dispatcher who coordinated the rescue for those 3 trucks stuck in the ice storm. My dad was one of those drivers. He talks about you every Christmas. I looked at the photo of my younger self. Yes, I said, smiling. That was a long time ago. You saved a lot of people, the boy said. It was a sign, a reminder that I was capable, that I was strong. But when I got back to the car, I just laughed and told Daniel. Someone recognized me. Can you believe it? He did not even look up. He just put the car in drive, from the back seat. Nicole kept checking her watch. She was not looking at the scenery. She was whispering to Daniel. Check-in at the resort is at 4. The court opens at 9 on Friday. We have to stay on schedule. She was not talking about a vacation schedule. As the sun began to set, casting long orange shadows across the asphalt, the SUV sped up. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window, lulled by the vibration of the engine. I started to doze off, watching the mile markers flash by. I did not know then that my son was counting them too, but he was not counting down to a destination. He was counting down to the moment he would pull over and leave me behind. The vibration of the road stopped, replaced by the harsh, artificial glow of blue neon cutting through the darkness. I blinked my eyes open, my neck stiff from sleeping against the window. Above us, a massive sign read, Rest Haven Plaza, the letters buzzing with a faint electrical hum. Daniel put the car in park and gently shook my shoulder. His voice was soft, the kind of tone you use with a child you're about to put to bed. He told me to wake up, that we needed to stop for gas and grab a late dinner, and that I should go use the restroom so I would be comfortable for the next leg of the trip. I reached for the door handle, but Nicole turned around from the front seat. Her smile was tight, illuminated by the dashboard lights. She insisted that I go inside immediately to get out of the cold. She told me that she and Daniel needed to rearrange some luggage in the back to make room for the snacks they planned to buy. Then she reached out her hand and said, "Let me take your purse." "Mum, I will bring it in with me when we come inside, so you do not have to carry it while you walk." It made sense. It was a thoughtful gesture. I handed her my leather bag, keeping only a few loose dollar bills and some quarters in my jeans pocket. I stepped out into the cool night air, the door thumping shut behind me. Inside, the plaza was a surreal island of light in the middle of nowhere. It was crowded with the chaotic energy of travel. I saw young families arguing over fast food orders, tired fathers bouncing crying babies on their hips, and long-haul truckers staring into styrofoam cups of black coffee. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a pale, sickly pallor on everyone's skin. I went into the restroom, splashed cold water on my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired, but I smiled at my reflection. I told myself that this old lady still had some adventure left in her. I was on a road trip with my son. I fixed my hair, dried my hands, and walked back out into the main hall. I pushed through the glass double doors, clutching a fresh cup of coffee, and scanned the parking lot for the silver SUV. I looked at the spot where we had parked, right under the tall light pole. It was empty. My stomach gave a small, uncomfortable lurch, but I pushed the panic down immediately. Logic told me they had just moved the car. They probably drove around to the gas pumps on the other side of the building. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around myself and began to walk. I circled the building, my eyes scanning every vehicle. I walked past the sedan with the sleeping kids. I walked past a row of motorcycles. I checked the gas pumps. There were cars there, but none of them were silver, and none of them held my son. I walked toward the darker section of the lot reserved for semi-trucks, the wind whipping my hair across my face. A station wagon rolled past me slowly, and the children in the back seat pressed their faces against the glass, staring at the woman wandering alone in the dark. For the first time, I felt the crushing weight of my own insignificance. Standing there between the idling engines and the smell of diesel, I felt small. I felt invisible. Then, a voice cut through the noise. It was a woman's voice, rough and loud. I turned to see a driver in a reflective vest standing by the cab of a massive red truck. It was Lena. She shouted over the wind, asking if I was looking for a silver SUV with Texas plates. I nodded eagerly, relief flooding my chest. I started to walk toward her, expecting her to point to where Daniel was parking. Instead, she pointed toward the highway exit ramp. She told me she saw that car peel out of the lot 10 minutes ago. She said she saw two people in the front seat, a man and a woman, and she thought they had forgotten something because they were driving so fast. But she did not see anyone in the back. I stopped walking. I laughed. A short, breathless sound. I told her she must be mistaken. I told her my son would never leave without me. I told her he was probably just turning around. But Lena did not lower her arm. She kept pointing at the darkness where the interstate merged with the night sky. The look on her face was not confusion. It was pity, a cold terror, sharper than the wind, slid down my spine. I spun around and ran back toward the main parking area. I ignored the pain in my knees. I screamed Daniel's name. But the roar of a passing 18-wheeler swallowed my voice instantly. I ran from aisle to aisle, looking for the glint of silver paint. I stopped in front of an ATM machine near the entrance, breathing hard, and patted my pockets. No debit card, no phone, no driver's license. I had nothing to prove I was a person. My legs gave out. I grabbed onto a concrete lamppost to keep from hitting the pavement. I looked out at the highway, a river of red taillights flowing away from me, endless and indifferent. Somewhere in that stream of light was my purse, my medicine, and the boy I had raised. The denial finally broke. I slid down the pole until I was crouching on the dirty concrete, and I whispered the words that my heart had known the moment I saw that empty parking spot. He really left me. Lena kept a firm hand on my shoulder as she guided me into the harsh, white light of the convenience store. She pulled a smartphone from her pocket and handed it to me. My fingers were shaking so badly I could barely tap the screen. I tried to picture Rachel's number. I closed my eyes and visualized the digits I had written on the refrigerator whiteboard for 5 years. I typed them in and pressed call. The line rang once, twice, and then a voice answered. But it was not Rachel. It was the gruff, recorded voice of a man telling me I had reached a generic voicemail box. I had missed one digit. I had transposed a 6 for a 9. I stared at the screen in horror, realizing that without my own phone, I was completely severed from the only person left who might care. The manager of the travel plaza did not offer me coffee. Instead, he made a phone call. 20 minutes later, 2 highway patrol officers walked in. They did not look like the heroes I used to dispatch on the radio. They looked tired and impatient. They approached me not with comfort, but with clipboards. The younger one began a rapid-fire interrogation that made my head spin. He asked for my full name, my date of birth, my home address, my social security number. Then came the medical questions. Was I diabetic? Was I on blood pressure medication? Did I have a history of confusion or memory lapses with every question? I felt less like a crime victim and more like a patient who had escaped from a ward. Then came the question I dreaded most. The older officer looked over his glasses and asked if I could produce any item at all that had my name or photograph on it. I looked down at my empty hands. They were trembling violently now, a tremor starting in my palms and shooting all the way up to my shoulders. I had nothing. I was a ghost in a denim jacket. Lena stepped between us, her voice sharp with frustration. She told them exactly what she had seen. She described the silver SUV speeding away. She told them there were 2 people in the front and the back seat was empty. The officer wrote it down, but I could see the skepticism in the set of his jaw. He looked at me and suggested that perhaps I had stepped out of the car to stretch my legs, and my family simply did not notice. He said they were probably circling back right now, panicked, looking for me. They took me into the small substation attached to the plaza. The computer terminal hummed as they ran my name. A record popped up, but it was ancient. It listed the house in Kansas, but the emergency contact field was blank. I realized with a sinking heart that since Jack died, I had never bothered to update the official files. I had assumed Daniel would always be there. I had erased myself from the system long before my son erased me from his life. The officer leaned back in his chair and lowered his voice, trying to sound gentle, which only made it worse. He asked if it was possible I was confused about the sequence of events. He asked if maybe we had stopped for gas and I had wandered off while they were inside paying. I felt a flash of hot anger, but it was quickly doused by shame. His doubt was contagious. For a second, I wondered if he was right. Had I imagined the look on Daniel's face? No, I knew what I saw. While the officers debated what to do with me, Lena sat in the corner. She held up her phone and quietly snapped a few pictures of me sitting on the hard plastic chair, hugging my knees to my chest. She did not tell me then, but she was typing a furious caption about how we treat our elders, posting it to a private group of long-haul truckers. She thought it would get a few likes and angry comments from her friends. She had no idea she was lighting a fuse. A man in a grease-stained jacket walked past the open door of the office. He paused, squinting at me. He said I looked familiar. He said I looked like the woman from an old newspaper clipping about the blizzard rescue, the dispatcher who stayed on the line for 48 hours straight. My heart leapt, but the officers just waved him along, dismissing it as chatter. My past was too far away to help me now. At midnight, the decision was made. They could not leave me at the rest stop, and they could not verify my story. They decided to transport me to the county station for further verification. I was placed in the back of the patrol car. The hard plastic seat was cold. A plexiglass divider separated me from the officers. I looked out the window as we pulled onto the highway. I watched the brightly lit signs of motels and 24-hour diners slide backward into the dark. They looked warm, but from back here, they were just inaccessible islands of light. At the station, they put a piece of paper in front of me. It was a form for the temporary intake of an unidentified or undocumented senior citizen. I picked up the pen. My hand shook so hard, the tip of the pen skittered across the paper. I forced myself to sign Margaret Louise Harlow. The signature looked jagged and weak, trapped inside the printed box. It did not look like my name. It looked like the signature of a woman who had just officially lost the right to decide her own fate. The morning sun that filtered through the blinds of the police station was weak and grey, much like how I felt inside. I was stiff from sleeping in a chair, my joints aching with a dull, persistent throb. Then the door opened, and a woman named Olivia walked in. She was from social services. She did not wear a uniform or carry a gun. She wore a soft wool sweater and carried 2 cups of steaming tea. Her voice was different from the officers. It was not an interrogation. It was a conversation. She asked me who I was before I ended up on this highway. For the first time in 12 hours, I stopped talking about the silver SUV and started talking about my life. I told her about Jack. I told her about Harlow and Sons hauling. I told her about the great blizzard of '98, when the interstate was shut down for 3 days and I stayed on the radio for 48 hours straight, guiding drivers to safety and coordinating fuel drops. Olivia stopped writing. She looked up, her eyes wide. She asked me if I was the Margaret Harlow from the Tri-County Gazette stories. I nodded, confused. A slow smile spread across her face. She told me that when she was a little girl. Her father drove a rig on that same route. She remembered him pointing to a newspaper clipping pinned to their kitchen corkboard and telling her that he was alive because a woman with a voice like iron and a heart like gold refused to let him freeze to death. I felt a warmth bloom in my chest that had nothing to do with the tea. I was not just a confused old woman to her anymore. I was a person. Olivia picked up the phone and dialed the number for the local paper in my hometown back in Kansas. A young reporter named Jonah answered. I could hear his voice rise in excitement through the receiver when Olivia mentioned my name. He said he knew the story. He said he would go to the archives immediately. While Olivia was on the phone, Lena came rushing back into the room. Her face was flushed. She held her phone up to show me. The photo she had taken of me earlier, the one where I looked small and defeated, had been shared by a trucker with a massive following on TikTok. He had added a caption about how the industry protects its own and how leaving a mother behind was a cardinal sin. The view count was climbing by the thousands every minute. The comments were rolling in faster than I could read. A digital army of strangers demanding justice for the lady in the denim jacket. Then Jonah called back. He had found it. He emailed a scanned image to Olivia, and she turned her computer monitor so I could see. There I was. I was 40 years old in the picture, my hair in a high ponytail, wearing a neon safety vest, standing next to a snowdrift, pointing a convoy of trucks toward a clear lane. I stared at that woman. I remembered her strength. I started to cry, not out of sadness, but because I finally recognized myself again. Jonah had more to say. His voice cracked over the speakerphone. He told us that 10 years ago, he had gone to college on a small grant from the Jack and Margaret Harlow Scholarship Fund. He said he owed his career to my family. He said he was going to make sure this story ran on the primetime news tonight. He was not asking for permission. He was asking for justice. Olivia and Lena looked at each other and made a decision. They were not going to wait for the slow, grinding gears of the police investigation. They were going to the court of public opinion. Jonah set up a video link. They put a camera in front of me. I felt awkward. My hair was messy, and my face was dirty from the road. But when asked to speak, I did not try to be eloquent. I just told the truth. I described the feeling of standing in that parking lot, holding a cold cup of coffee, watching the red taillights fade away, and realizing that the person driving that car had calculated exactly how long it would take for me to disappear. An hour later, I was dozing in the break room, exhausted by the adrenaline dump. The old television in the corner was tuned to the local news. Suddenly, the anchor's face changed. A graphic flashed on the screen. It was the old photo of me in the snow, side by side with the photo Lena had taken of me on the plastic chair. The headline read in bold letters, "The hero of the highway abandoned." I watched myself through half-closed eyes. I looked broken on that screen, but I also looked real. Lena stood by the door, her phone raised, recording the television broadcast. She whispered that the signal was out. The story was no longer sitting in a police file. It was flying through the airwaves, heading straight for a luxury resort where my son was likely ordering his breakfast. While I was sitting in a police station counting the cracks in the linoleum floor, My son was sitting in a sun-drenched dining room 300 miles away. I know every detail of that morning now. I have the receipts, the security footage, and the testimony of the only person in that family who still had a conscience. Daniel and Nicole were eating breakfast at a table overlooking a pristine lake. Daniel had his phone out, refreshing his banking app. He was staring at the transfer I had made the week before, satisfied that the balance was still untouched. He thought he had won. Nicole was buttering a piece of toast, her voice low and clinical. She was laying out the timeline. She told him that when I failed to appear at the lawyer's office for the reading of the will, the court would have no choice but to appoint a conservator. She said that if they played their cards right and looked like heartbroken children dealing with a mother in cognitive decline, the judge would hand them control of my assets within a month. It was a cold, mathematical equation to them. I was not a person. I was an obstacle to be managed. But they forgot about Emily. My granddaughter is 16 years old. She was sitting at the table with them, picking at a bowl of fruit, wearing her headphones around her neck. They thought she was listening to music. They did not know she had pressed the record button on her phone. Emily had been suspicious for days. She had sensed the tension, the hushed conversations, the way her parents stopped talking whenever she entered the room. She did not understand the full scope of their plan, but she knew enough to be afraid. Then, the atmosphere in the restaurant shifted. A large television mounted above the bar was tuned to the local news affiliate. The volume was low, but the image was unmistakable. My face, grainy and tired, filled the screen. Beneath it, a ticker tape scrolled in bold red letters asking if the highway hero had been abandoned or if she was simply lost. The conversation at their table died instantly. Nicole lunged for the remote control on the table, trying to change the channel. But it was too late. A couple at the next table was already pointing. The report flashed an old photo of the Harlow and Sons fleet dedication ceremony. In the picture, a young, proud Daniel was standing right next to me. The guests in the restaurant looked at the screen, and then they looked at the man in the expensive polo shirt sitting by the window. The resemblance was undeniable. Daniel's phone began to vibrate against the mahogany table. It buzzed once, twice, and then it became a continuous rattle. Texts were flooding in from his real estate partners, his drinking buddies, and his neighbors. They all included a link to the article and the same question: is that your mother? The image of the successful, self-made businessman he had spent 20 years cultivating began to fracture in real time. Emily excused herself and ran to her room. She pulled up the news report on her laptop. When she heard my voice recounting the story of the red taillights fading into the dark, she felt sick. She opened the audio files she had secretly recorded over the last 48 hours. She replayed her father's voice, saying that if I was not at the court date, the law would do the rest. Suddenly, those words did not sound like financial planning. They sounded like a conspiracy. Back at the table, Daniel panicked. He dialed Rachel's number. He tried to get ahead of the narrative. He put on his most frantic voice, telling his sister that I had wandered off while he was paying for gas and that he was driving in circles looking for me. But Rachel cut him off with a voice like ice. She told him she had already seen the report. She asked him why, if he was looking for me. The security cameras at the rest stop showed his car merging onto the highway without tapping the brakes. She told him the police were already pulling the toll road data. Nicole tried to pivot. She hissed at him to stick to the story that I had dementia. She said if they claimed I was confused, people would believe the suit-wearing son over the disheveled old woman. But Daniel looked up at the television again. He saw the interview where I looked straight into the camera. He did not see confusion. He saw a clarity that terrified him. Upstairs, Emily made her choice. She opened her email. She attached the voice recordings. She also attached a screenshot of a text message she had tried to send me 2 days ago, a message that had failed to deliver because of bad reception. It read, "Dad is planning something bad. Please do not go on this trip." She typed Rachel's email address in the recipient field and hit send. That single click did more damage to Daniel's life than any lawsuit ever could. The atmosphere in the small police substation had shifted. It was no longer a holding pen for a lost woman. It had become a war room. Olivia walked in with a tablet in her hand, her face flushed with a mixture of excitement and gravity. She told me the story had gone national. The tip line was overwhelmed. Among the hundreds of calls, 2 mattered. One was from my daughter, Rachel, who was already on a plane. The other was from Benjamin Cole, the lawyer back in Kansas who had handled Jack's estate for 20 years. Olivia set up a secure video call. When Benjamin's face appeared on the screen, looking older and grayer than I remembered, I felt a lump form in my throat. He did not waste time with pleasantries. He leaned into the camera and told me something that made my blood run cold. He said that 4 years ago, when Jack sat in his office to finalize the will. My husband had insisted on a secret clause. Jack had told him that he loved our son, but he did not trust Daniel's ambition. The clause stated that if there was any evidence of coercion, neglect, or intentional harm toward me for the purpose of accelerating the inheritance, the entire estate would bypass Daniel and go directly to a charitable trust for long-haul truckers. Benjamin had kept quiet because he prayed he would never have to use it. Then came the second blow. Benjamin held up a thick, sealed envelope. He told me it was a personal letter from Jack to Daniel. It was meant to be given to our son only if he proved that he valued family over money. Benjamin lowered the envelope slowly and said that based on the police report he had just read, that letter would never be delivered. Daniel had not just lost the money. He had lost the final words of his father. Olivia and Benjamin looked at me. The room went very quiet. They asked me the question I had been terrified to answer. Did I want to treat this as a misunderstanding? A family tragedy to be handled privately? Or did I want to pursue justice? Did I want to accept that my son might face criminal charges for abandoning a vulnerable adult? I looked at my hands. For a moment, I did not see the wrinkled skin of a 63-year-old woman. I saw the hands of a young mother holding the steering wheel, teaching a teenage boy how to drive in an empty parking lot. I remembered Daniel's laugh when he finally parallel parked the car. I loved that boy. But then the image shifted. I saw the grainy security footage of a man placing his keys on a hotel table, checking his bank balance while his mother shivered in a police station. I realized that the boy I raised was gone. If I stayed silent, I was not protecting him. I was giving permission to every child who viewed their parents as expired inventory. I picked up the pen. My hand was steady this time. I signed the power of attorney giving Benjamin the right to represent me in all legal matters. It felt like signing a death warrant for my old life, but it also felt like breathing for the first time in days. An hour later, the heavy security door swung open and Rachel ran in. She did not say a word. She just fell to her knees beside my chair and buried her face in my lap, sobbing. When she finally looked up, her eyes were swollen. She admitted that she had suspected Daniel for a long time. She told me she had stayed silent because she did not want to be the one to break the family apart. I smoothed her hair and told her that she did not break it. Daniel did. Silence was just the glue we had used to hold the cracks together, and the glue had finally failed. Olivia then introduced me to a woman who had been standing quietly in the back of the room. Her name was Harper. She was a young attorney, sharp-eyed and intense. She told me she specialized in elder abuse cases. She told me her own grandmother had been left in a nursing home lobby with a trash bag of clothes, and she had sworn then that she would burn the system down. Harper laid out a map on the table. It was not a map of roads, but a map of evidence. She listed the toll booth cameras, the GPS data from Daniel's phone, the viral post from Lena, and the testimony Emily was ready to give. She said we had the chance to make this a landmark case. I stood up. The reporter, Jonah, was waiting outside with a camera crew for a follow-up interview. I smoothed down my shirt. I did not wash the dust off my face. I wanted the world to see the road on my skin. I walked out into the glare of the lights and looked directly into the lens. This time, I did not whisper. I spoke with the voice of a woman who had directed fleets of 18-wheelers through ice storms. I said that my son did not get lost. I said he made a plan. And I said that if I stayed silent, tomorrow there would be another mother left on another highway. I was done being a victim. I was the prosecution. The preliminary hearing took place in a sterile room that smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. On the left side of the aisle, Daniel and Nicole sat with their defense attorney. They looked like ghosts of the successful couple they pretended to be. Their skin was grey, and they refused to make eye contact with anyone. On the right side, I sat with Rachel, Harper, and Benjamin. But the most important person in the room was sitting right next to me, holding Rachel's hand. It was Emily. My granddaughter had chosen her side, and her presence was a silent accusation that hit her father harder than any gavel. Daniel's lawyer stood up first. He smoothed his expensive tie and began to weave a story that made my stomach turn. He claimed that this was a terrible misunderstanding caused by my cognitive decline. He told the judge that I had wandered out of the car while Daniel and Nicole were busy pumping gas. He said they drove off, assuming I was asleep in the back. And when they realized I was missing, they were frantic. He painted a picture of a son paralyzed by panic, searching the highway for his confused mother. Then Harper stood up. She did not use adjectives. She used video. She played the security footage from the Rest Haven Plaza. The room watched in silence as the screen showed Daniel and Nicole standing inside the convenience store. They were not frantic. They were buying pretzels and energy drinks. They were laughing. Then, the footage showed them walking back to the car, getting in, and driving away. There was no hesitation. There was no looking in the back seat. They did not stop to ask the attendant if they had seen an elderly woman. They just merged onto the highway and headed straight for their vacation. Then came the moment that broke the room. Emily was called to the stand. She was shaking, her small hands gripping the railing, but her voice was clear. She testified that she had heard her parents discussing how to leave me in a place that was crowded enough so they would not be charged with murder, but far enough away that I would miss the court date. She said they told her that if she told anyone, I would be put in a state nursing home and she would never see me again. It was not physical violence. It was psychological warfare. Harper played the audio recordings Emily had sent. Daniel's voice filled the room, tinny and cruel. He said that if I did not make the probate hearing, the law would do the rest for them. Then Nicole's voice answered, chillingly calm. She said to let the highway help them. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a man, but Benjamin was not done. He approached the bench with the sealed letter from Jack. He explained to the judge that my late husband had foreseen this possibility. He explained the clause in the will that stripped Daniel of everything if he harmed me. Then, with the judge's permission, he read a single line from the letter Jack had written 4 years ago. The voice of my dead husband seemed to rise from the paper. He wrote that the day Daniel chose to leave his mother by the roadside was the day he was no longer his son. I watched Daniel. He slumped forward in his chair, putting his head in his hands. For the first time, he wasn't looking at his bank account or his lawyer. He was looking at the ruin of his soul. Nicole saw the ship sinking and tried to jump. She stood up and started shouting that she had just followed her husband, that she thought Rachel had come to pick me up. But Harper was ready. She projected a series of text messages Nicole had sent to her best friend the day before the trip. One of them read that she was finally going to get rid of the old bomb and clear their debts. The gasp in the courtroom was audible. Finally. The judge asked me if I wanted to speak. I stood up. I did not scream. I did not cry. I just described the cold. I described the sound of the wind in the parking lot. I described the specific shape of the taillights as they disappeared. I told them that every second I stood there was a knife twisting in my heart. Not because I was lost, but because I knew exactly where I was. The judge did not hesitate. He ruled that there was sufficient evidence to bind the case over for criminal trial on charges of elder abandonment, conspiracy, and attempted fraud. He ordered Daniel remanded into custody immediately. Nicole was to be charged as an accomplice. As the bailiff moved to handcuff my son, his lawyer leaned over and asked if I wanted a moment to negotiate, perhaps to speak to Daniel privately before they took him away. I looked at the man who used to be my baby boy. I looked at his tear-stained face. I shook my head. I told him that the part of me that wanted to forgive him was left at that rest stop that night. I turned my back and walked out of the courtroom, holding my daughter's hand. The criminal trial took months to schedule, but the real verdict was delivered much sooner, under the bright lights of a national television studio in New York City. I sat on a beige sofa, my hands folded in my lap. Behind me, a massive screen displayed a high-definition image of the Rest Haven Plaza, its neon sign glowing like a crime scene. 300 miles away, Daniel was sitting in his living room, wearing an ankle monitor that blinked every 30 seconds. He turned on the television to drown out the silence of his empty house. He wanted to watch the morning news to avoid thinking about his looming court date. Instead, he saw his mother. The chyron at the bottom of the screen did not mince words. It read in bold yellow letters, "I was abandoned by my son at a highway rest stop." I looked into the camera, knowing he was watching. I did not speak like a victim. I spoke like a dispatcher. I told the host that my son did not make a mistake. I told the audience that Daniel treated me like a semi-truck with a blown transmission. He realized the cost of repairs was too high, so he pushed the vehicle into the breakdown lane, stripped it for parts, and hitched a ride with the insurance money. The studio audience went silent. I could feel the collective shudder in the room. Then the host invited my army onto the stage. Harper, the lawyer who built the case. Olivia, the social worker who believed me. Lena, the trucker who found me. Jonah, the reporter who dug up my past. And Benjamin, the keeper of my husband's secrets. The audience saw that it took a village of strangers to save a mother from her own flesh and blood. The impact was immediate. By the time the commercial break aired, the chairperson of a federal committee had tweeted that they were drafting new legislation. They were calling it Margaret's Law. It would classify the abandonment of a dependent senior as a felony with mandatory prison time. My revenge had gone beyond my family. It had become systemic. When the actual sentencing day arrived, Daniel looked small. He pleaded guilty to a reduced charge to avoid a jury trial. He tried to tell the judge that debt had pushed him to the edge, that he was desperate. The judge was not impressed. He sentenced Daniel to 5 years of probation and 2,000 hours of community service, specifically to be served in state-run nursing facilities. He was stripped of his right to inherit a single dime from my estate and permanently barred from holding power of attorney for any senior citizen. Nicole did not wait for the gavel to drop. She filed for divorce the week before the sentencing. She took half of what little they had left and vanished, desperate to distance herself from the scandal. Emily chose to stay with her mother for school, but she spends every weekend with Rachel and talks to me every night. She is the silent witness who survived the wreckage. I signed the papers with Benjamin the following Tuesday. I transferred the bulk of the Harlow estate into the Jack and Margaret Harlow Fund. The money that Daniel tried to steal is now being used to pay for legal aid for abandoned seniors and emergency funds for stranded truckers. I kept enough to buy a small house and a used pickup truck. I took back the title to my own life. 6 months later, I pulled that pickup truck into the parking lot of Rest Haven Plaza. Lena was in the passenger seat. We bought 2 coffees and sat on the tailgate, watching the cars rush by on the interstate. I looked at the spot where the silver SUV had been parked that night. I took a sip of coffee and told Lena that this was the spot where I officially divorced the illusion of having a perfect son. Just then, the door to the men's restroom opened. An elderly man with a cane stepped out, looking around the busy plaza with confused, watery eyes. He took a few steps toward the gas pumps, searching for a car that was not there. His hands started to shake. I did not wait. I hopped off the tailgate and walked straight over to him. I put a gentle hand on his arm and asked him who he was looking for. I pulled out my phone, my new phone, which I knew how to use perfectly, and dialed the number he gave me. I stayed with him until his daughter ran out of the convenience store, weeping with relief. I realized then that my revenge against Daniel was not the sentence the judge gave him. My revenge was standing here, on this highway, refusing to let the cycle repeat itself. The road was no longer a monster that swallowed the weak. It was just a road, and for the first time in a long time, I was the one driving. Thank you all so much for listening to my story today. I would love to know where you folks are tuning in from, so please drop your city or state in the comments below so we can connect. If you believe that family is something you protect and never leave behind, please hit that like button. Subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, and smash the hype button to help this video reach more people who need to hear it.